Alright, enemies that summon other enemies, Hollow Knight. Okay, here we go. In Hollow Knight, several enemies have the ability to summon other enemies. These include the Oblobbles, which spawn smaller rolling obble enemies. Primal Pariahs? Primal Pariahs, which summon a Primal Aspid, just one though. Okay, and Stalking Devout, who summon Grub Mimics. There's a lot of conflicting information about Hollow Knight going around, but no one really seems to be testing out these myths, which means they get to run wild. Some of the ones I'll cover today are likely myths that you believe yourself. Oh, and if you haven't watched the first episode, I'll link to it down below. With that said, I'm Holland, and this is Hollow Knight Myth Busting. Claim number 1. It is possible to heal more than 2 masks at once. Alright, so we all know about Deep Focus allowing you to heal 2 masks at once, but really that's about it for increasing the power of your focus, right? Well, let's find out. In the first episode, I covered a glitch that allows you to restore health while also blocking an attack with Boulder Shell. Basically, it looks like you didn't heal any masks, but if you then take damage, you won't lose any health, because technically you did heal, the mask counter just didn't visually update. And while this was super cool, it turns out there's so much more we can do with this glitch. For starters, we could simply put on Deep Focus, giving us an additional invisible mask, but let's go even further. See, the mask counter updates when you take damage and when you successfully restore health. That means just by putting on Deep Focus, activating the glitch, and then healing, regularly, we can do this. Bam, that's 4 masks with 1 heal. You won't get that deal anywhere else. Well, technically that's not true. I restored the first 2 when setting up the glitch. They were just hidden until I finished the second heal. But don't rejoice quite yet, because believe it or not, we can go even further. It took me quite a while to get this to work, but I found out that you can actually stack this glitch. Let me show you how it's done. First, I activate the glitch. Then, before getting hit or healing properly, I activate the glitch again. Getting it 2 times in a row can be rather tough. I found these squid enemies to relatively consistently trigger the glitch, but it still requires somewhat precise timing. But finally I do it, and now I heal 5 masks. 5. I don't know why it isn't 6, given that we're using Deep Focus, but who cares? I just healed 5 masks in one go, and people say Deep Focus is a bad charm. Okay, well, it is a bad charm, this is just a visual glitch. I'm not actually healing any more than usual, but it's still so cool that you can do this. So do we mark the myth as confirmed because it looks like it works, or busted because we're technically not restoring more than 2 masks at once? Screw it. Confirmed. Claim number 2. You can trigger Desolate Dive faster by jumping first. Now, if you saw the first video, you might remember that I already busted this myth. Well, not everyone thought so. There were so many people who just decided to disagree with the evidence I provided in that first video without any evidence of their own. Okay, well, to be fair, some people did make good arguments. For example, pointing out that I wasn't using Quickcast, which was true and a significant blunder on my part. So let's test it again, but this time a bit more thoroughly. And if you still disagree with my conclusion, you're gonna have to provide some actual evidence, bucko. This isn't just personal opinion, it's science. While I show you this footage, I'll remind you of the claim. Many people think that by doing a tiny jump before casting Desolate Dive or Descending Dark, you will activate the spell faster and get out of danger more quickly. Now, I understand why people would think this, it makes a lot of sense intuitively, but it seems like the ability is programmed with a generic duration that is largely unaffected by how far you are into the air. I say largely because obviously at great heights it's gonna take longer to cast the spell, but it doesn't appear as though you can really save time by doing the opposite, because even though casting the spell from the ground makes you go higher, you also appear to go faster, largely or entirely making up the difference. Let me make this crystal clear. So long as I stop myself from getting too annoyed at the people who don't seem to care about evidence, I do not have a bias about this myth. Heck, I kinda want it to be true, just because it's so cool. But let's actually look at the evidence before drawing any conclusions. I lined up these two clips from the first frame of the animation. That means they should start at almost the exact same time, although there might be a frame or two of error in between because I had to line them up manually. So keep that in mind. And here we go. We start at 1 times speed, then descend all the way down to 10% of the original speed. I'm looking at these clips and they're almost completely identical. Slowing the clip down all the way to 10%, there's perhaps a frame of difference from the left to the right. That means one of two things. Either I didn't line the clips up perfectly and this is just measurement error, or doing the jump saves about 100th of a second. Now here's the thing, folks. You cannot feel 100th of a second. You just cannot. Even if it's true that the trick saves about that much time, you would never have been able to feel it. If you've ever done this trick and thought, oh, this is definitely slightly faster, that's placebo, something your mind makes up because, again, it looks like the trick makes you go faster. Now, I don't even think this evidence is enough to show that there is actually a difference. It could still very much be nothing but measurement error. Because again, it's 100th of a second or thereabouts if there is actually a difference. That's a tiny amount. And in either case, to say that jumping before casting Desolate Dive is faster is misusing that term to such a great degree that it might as well be lying. So that's my evidence. If you disagree with it, you'll need to provide some of your own, not just unsubstantiated claims. And there's also no arguing that the trick gives you extra time to decide what to do, as some people have stated. It absolutely, obviously does not. You're not changing your decision after jumping to trigger the ability. When you do the tiny jump, you've already pressed the spell button. Sorry, I really don't mean to be rude. I just find it slightly frustrating that so many people don't care about the counter evidence to their beliefs. Anyway, I think the reason people even believe this in the first place might be because of this YouTube video, 10 Levels of Hollow Knight Combat. It has almost 1 million views, which would explain why this myth is so widespread. But if you actually watch the part where he tells you about this supposed trick, you can see that he's just claiming that it works without any actual evidence. This is how misinformation is spread, folks. Anyway, let me finish by conceding this point. There is still an upside to performing this trick, and I think if you're really good at it, it's still a valid reason to use it. And here is that upside. As I show in the clip, when doing the tiny jump first, you expose your hitbox way less than you otherwise would. If there's something dangerous right above you, keeping low to the ground might well save you from getting hit. And so I'm not saying this trick isn't useful at all, although I definitely didn't give this element enough praise in the first episode. I am, however, saying that you cannot trigger Desolate Dive faster by jumping first. Myth busted. Claim number 3. Some enemies can spawn infinite children. Now for a myth that's not only a little more lighthearted, but is also one of my absolute favorites. Okay, so you know how there are enemies in Hollow Knight that can summon other enemies? Well, have you ever wondered how many they can summon at once? Maybe that sounds boring to you, but I promise you it's not. The more I looked into this, the more I was astonished about my findings. Oh, and I used a mod to make myself invulnerable in these clips. That way I don't have to move around as much to dodge the enemies, so we can get a clearer picture. First up, the Aspid Mother. Now, the Aspid Mother summons tiny hatchlings to fight you, but will stop when reaching a certain amount. Because there are rooms in this game with more than one Aspid Mother, it's possible to test whether this max capacity is global or local. Global means there can only be a limited number of children at once, no matter how many mothers there are, while local means that each summoner has its own max capacity, and that for every new mother, you can have more children. Aspid Mothers have a global max capacity. Then we have the Husk Hive. These fellows summon hivelings to attack you and, unlike the Aspid Mothers, have local max capacities. So if you've summoned the maximum amount of bees from one Husk Hive and then run into another, that husk can then start summoning new bees. Moving on to the Elder Boulders, you might expect these to have a local capacity, but they actually don't. They share a single global max capacity. So when you fall into the boulder trap, there will never be more than one boulder giving you trouble at any one time, and when you defeat it, either of the two elders can resummon it. Finally, the Carver Hatcher has a special property that none of the other summoners do. Firstly, the Hatcher has a global max capacity, meaning it will stop summoning dirt carvers if it has a friend nearby who has already contributed to the maximum limit, unless you slay some of the brood, at which point they can continue summoning more. Now here's the special property. After a certain number of summons, the Carver Hatcher will run out, switch to a new sprite, and then start attacking you on its own. You might have already seen this before, but it's interesting to me that only the Carver Hatcher appears to have a limited number of summons. This is likely due to the difficulty of the dirt carvers, which may easily overwhelm you. Now, as far as I know, those are all the regular enemies that can summon other enemies. Let me know if I missed any. But then I remembered there are also bosses that can do this. We can't forget about those. Flukemarm has a max capacity, after which he'll try to keep spawning more brood, but simply fail. The Vengefly Kings have a max capacity and may spawn either 1 or 2 enemies at once. I spent a good while trying to discern whether this capacity was global or local, but I just couldn't seem to figure it out. Lost Kin appears to have a max capacity of 6, then we have Grey Prince Sot, who can summon 1 to 2 enemies at a time with a max capacity of 3. Now, uniquely, he can summon 2 different types of enemies which share that capacity of 3. It also seems like he can only summon 2 of the same enemy at once. And finally, we have the Collector. Now, he has got to be an interesting case. Just think about it. He's basically the summoner enemy, the king of summoners. Summoning arguably is his primary attack. But interestingly, after only 4 enemies, he reaches capacity. Doesn't seem to matter which enemies either. So what does he do then? Well, he still jumps up into the ceiling, but just immediately comes out again without chucking any jars. Pretty interesting. I would have expected him to just stay on the ground, but it seems like he's still trying to summon more enemies. The game just won't allow him to, and he's forced to jump down again. Now, you probably don't remember the myth we're busting, and neither do I, but I just checked, and we're trying to find out whether there is a single enemy, even one, that can spawn an infinite number of children. Which, perhaps surprisingly, doesn't appear to be the case. But then I remembered, there is another boss who summons enemies. I actually went to collect footage by fighting him on Radiant, and only then realized that I had missed a boss, the Soul Warrior. But I mean, there's no chance that this guy will be able to summon an infinite amount of... Oh my god. We found him. Our Lord and Savior, the all-powerful Soul Warrior. I had this match running for 5 minutes straight, and he was still spawning follies by the end of it. That's a lot of follies, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a max capacity. Myth confirmed. If you're enjoying the video so far, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. We're fast approaching 10,000 subscribers, and it would be awesome to hit that goal before Silksong comes out. Thank you so much. Claim number 4. Shaman Stone increases the hitbox of all spells. This is another myth that I covered in the first episode. Basically, no one really seems to know whether Shaman Stone increases the size of all spells or just Vengeful Spirit and Shade Soul. In that first episode, I showed how it does not appear to affect the size of Howling Wraiths, Desolate Dive, the Abyssal Shriek, or Descending Dark. But once again, not everyone was satisfied with the evidence. Some viewers wanted to know whether just the hitboxes of the spells were affected, rather than the visual sprites. And so I ran the test again, with and without Shaman Stone, now with hitboxes enabled. I tried to line up my spells with the environmental hitboxes, using those as rulers, and as you should be able to tell, there doesn't appear to be any difference between casting the spells with and without Shaman Stone. Again, if you have any counter evidence, I'd love to see it. Now, here's the interesting part. I've always been wondering why Shaman Stone seems to increase the power of spells very differently. Notably, it only increases the damage of Vengeful Spirit and Shade Soul by 33%, while the other spells gain something roughly akin to a 50% buff. Now, if it's true that the size increase only applies to the Vengeful Spirit and Shade Soul, it suddenly makes total sense why those 2 spells would get the short end of the stick in regard to damage. Right? Because if those 2 spells are now larger, they're more likely to hit, and to double hit, dealing more damage overall. And so to compensate for the other spells lacking this size increase, they gain additional damage from Shaman Stone. I don't know about you, but that just seems so sensical, and it makes every puzzle piece fit very nicely together. You wanna know what's funny? I have 8 more myths that I've already tested and either confirmed or busted, but if I put them into this video, it'll get way too long. So how about this? If you have any myths of your own, you can write them down in the comments below and I may cover them in a future episode. And if you want another episode, you should also let me know, either by liking the video, subscribing, or just telling me straight up. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Hollow Knight Mythbusting, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye! In Hollow Knight, several enemies have the ability to summon other enemies. These include Oblobbles. These flying enemies split into smaller, faster versions when hit, effectively summoning more threats. Where did you get that from? Primal Aspids. While not directly summoning, their hatchlings behave like independent enemies, swarming the player. Primal Aspid hatchlings, that sounds awful. Soul Twisters. These enemies can summon soul totems, which then spawn smaller enemies or projectiles. Man, that sounds awesome. I wish they did that. Grub Mimics. Grub Mimics? These deceptive creatures mimic grubs, but attack when approached, essentially summoning an enemy encounter. Oh, come on. Siblings? These are small, aggressive creatures that chase the knight and can overwhelm the player. Okay, so they don't summon other enemies or what? And then we have Stalking Devouts. These enemies can summon hatchlings to aid them in combat. Wow, not a single one of these was true, but you tried your best, AI.